Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. I'm Manny Diaz. This week our special guest is Blair Schroeder. He is a trustee on the Abilene ISD School Board, Place 3. Blair, it's been some time. Thanks for hanging out today.
No, it's great. It's good to see you in person, and I watch you every week and obviously see the work that you all do, but it's good to sit across from somebody like yourself.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Well, today we have a lot of different things to talk about. TEA ratings, Vader. Let's kind of start with, you are, I guess, surpassing the year mark as a trustee on the school board. Overall, I mean, the experience was what it was, what you thought it was going to be?
No, great question. And, absolutely. I think that when I look at a lot of the work that I get a chance to do in this community and elsewhere, this is something that has tangible, meaningful impact. And so it's been a lot. I mean, one of the reasons why I ran in the first place was because there were things I felt passionately about and opportunities for progress that I wanted to see.
Abilene ISD is making progress. I think it's safe to say, and I think for all perhaps the naysayers out there who may be negative Nancy's, but I think if you look at it from a neutral perspective, AISD is making progress. Some of these things that you had kind of you talked about certainly in your list. We'll start with kind of like curriculum reform, and I was with the Blue Bonnet ELA curriculum. It's involving a little bit of perhaps faith-based curriculum, if you want to call it that. Tell me about that, and certainly it's modernizing curriculum in diverse classrooms, if you will.
Bottom line is our teachers need tools to be able to teach our kids in a way that has meaning and impact consistent with our values. And so for me, the Blue Bonnet discussion was one that became hyper-politicized. But I can also say I literally went through over 500 different lessons plans because I wanted to kind of push out the noises that were on the right or on the left and see it for myself. And in just about every instance, and within, I mean, it's a little fuzzy now, but I think there were about 26 different references in the 500 plus pieces of curriculum I looked at that referenced some type of faith-based item. And a lot of these were stories like the Good Samaritan, which, I think that's a great Bible story, one that we've taught in our home, but it's also transcends just Scripture. There's Good Samaritan laws in every state in America, and so it's a common term that's used. There were also references to things that were outside of the Bible, if you're looking at other elements of faith. And so this was something that was widely supported. It became politicized, but how AISD took the approach was we had a committee that came together to look at high-quality teaching and instructional materials. So this was years and years of education leaders who looked at the material and felt like this provided teachers with a great opportunity to instruct their kids. It created flexibility in the classroom, and it also allowed for teachers to be able to have essentially what they would argue more class time because there was material that allowed them to teach what they needed to that was appropriate for grade level. And as a trustee and as a parent, I was very supportive of what we saw, and I'm proud of that.
I know I do want to touch on Vader. It's the voter approval tax ratification election. But first, I think fiscal responsibility within the district has been something that's been, talked about, since Dr. John Kuhn took over as superintendent, was appointed to that. And tell me about, I guess, the school board has been managed to reduce payroll costs by $5.5 million. There's been a massive deficit that's been overarching. Tell me about what you are doing to kind of curb this.
Sure. I think everybody, whether you've been following along with AISD and our school budget challenges, I think everybody, by and large, to some degree, understands what it means to make ends meet in their own home. And the old saying, no money, no mission. When you don't have the financial resources that you need, you have to leverage those funds in ways where you're making cuts, you're making hard choices. And those aren't always the things that you want to make those cuts on necessarily, but they're the things that you need to do to make ends meet. And so much like a lot of people over the last handful of years have had to go through that in their own lives, our school district's been no different. There were things, I can't get into what this previous school board did in terms of before I got there, but when I came in over this last year, we had over a $12.9 million budget deficit. It does not take rocket science to understand that whenever you have an issue like that, you've either got to create more revenue or you got to make cuts, and in some cases you got to do both. While at the same time, we've got to improve our educational outcomes. And so coming on board, year one, two key priorities. One, improve our educational outcomes, which we'll talk about here in a minute, but then also get our budget under control. And so to your point, we're now down to around $3.5 million budget deficit, cutting just shy of around $9 million, almost 10, if you really start sharpening the pencil in 1 year.
Is there a timeline that that's expected that you guys are looking at
sure.
in terms of when AISD can kind of be balanced on the fiscal sheet?
Absolutely. And so really year one, we came in and we said, hey, with a budget deficit like this, we need to try to cut it in half year one, balance it in year two, if we're lucky, and then year three, either balance it if we haven't already, but then start living into a lean balanced budget model. And so I'm proud to say that we've already made significant progress. So instead of going from a $13 million budget deficit and cutting that in half, we've exceeded that. And now we're at about $3.4 million budget deficit.
Vader, it's voter approval tax ratification election. It gives voters the chance to approve more than $10 million in new annual funding, $3.7 million from local sources, $6.3 million from the state. The average tax bill would drop by almost $209, más o menos. Tell me about this. How can this help someone here? How can this help AISD?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to understand that one of the things that we've done coming in year one, and I would say, obviously as a school board member, but also with new leadership in downtown with Dr. John Kuhn, is try to say, hey, what tools are out there that we haven't maybe used in the past that we're seeing other districts use to some high degree of effectiveness. And one of those was the Vader. And so Texas, they created a state law some sessions ago where they created what's called copper pennies and golden pennies. And so everybody can kind of try to wrap their head around exactly what that means. But essentially think of it like this, is there has been a fund that has been created that taxpayers pay into when they pay their taxes to Austin. And each school, each district, if gets approved by the voters, then they basically get it's like a matching, I'm going to call it like a grant, although I know it's not technically a grant. But to your point, with the numbers you just cited, what would happen essentially is for golden pennies, each district was given a certain number of golden pennies that they can use and a certain number of copper pennies that they can use once approved. And so AISD has not leveraged the full arsenal of the golden and copper pennies at their disposal. And so essentially what that allows us to do is go back to the state, the voters approve it, and for every dollar that we put in, we basically get $3 back up to this $10 million number referenced. And that applies every year. And so for me, if I'm taking off my parent hat, I'm taking off my school board member hat, I'm just putting on a fiscally conservative hat who kind of likes to make sure the math works. Abilene is sending state dollars to Austin. Austin's taking those dollars, giving some back to Abilene. But a lot of those state dollars are going to other school districts who are taking advantage of this program. And so I'd much rather keep Abilene dollars here to help educate Abilene kids. And so that's really what this is about, is taking dollars that have come from Abilene to Austin, bringing those dollars back here to help education, help improve our outcomes by our product in the classroom, help provide additional support to our teachers and staff, help us address a lot of the aging infrastructure that we have. One of the things that we talked about to balance budget, sometimes that's deferred maintenance. We've got a bus fleet that's incredibly outdated. So it's not taking money just to go on a shopping spree. It's really kind of battening down the hatches, creating a good, firm financial foundation that we can build from as we're becoming more intelligent with our fiscal stewardship.
We're going to step aside for a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're talking outcomes in the recent TEA ratings distributed down from Austin to AISD and the rest of the state. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk about the recent TEA scores that were handed out. AISD received an overall score of a C. 13 campuses, showed improvement over the course from 2023 to 2024. 9 campuses had decreased performance in that. Tell me, and whenever I read on social media and you read on the web and you hear, oh, well, I mean, it's just AISD just being AISD, and then see things that, oh, well, perhaps it's not an actual representation of the rating system of what's
Sure.
actually going on in a school district. Kind of break this down for me, because this C
Yeah.
average here.
Yeah, so I'm going to measure my words carefully, but I definitely recognize that there is an attitude in our community of AISD gonna AISD, and to me, I find that ill-informed and short-sighted. I recognize that there's been a historical reputation. Heck, part of that's why I ran for school board. So I recognize that we've had significant opportunities for progress. That said, those opportunities are being fully realized. And so for me, whenever I see these TEA ratings, they're trending in the right direction. We had a goal whenever we came on, I mentioned this a moment ago, year one, we really need to start thinking about how do we systematically create a plan, a pathway, if you will, toward a better outcome. You're not going to fix it in one year, in one season. That's just not how it works. It took Jimmy Johnson 3 years to turn the Cowboys around in the 90s.
Certainly.
And I think it's fair to say that AISDs do more than 1 year to get things turned around. That said, when you look at our North Star goal, which is by the start of the class year 2028, to have our students, predominantly more than 75% of those students, in an A or B rated school. When I came on board, we only had 6% of our students in an A or B rated school. That's not a good number. And that definitely plays into the reputation of AISDs lagging in performance. The reality is we've made very strategic changes across how we're approaching our educational product. We've tightened our belts financially and academically to be able to make sure that we're putting investment where it needs to go. We've updated our curriculums that we're having in our classrooms. We're spending more time on instruction, and we've made some changes downtown that I think are posturing us for success. And in light of that, we're already starting to see results. So we've seen in 1 year, our initial goal was maybe we can try to get it to 20% by year one. We're at 34% of our students are in A or B schools. So that's more than threefold where we were this time last year. And we are going to get to that goal by 2028.
I'm not in education. I just see the grade, as do other viewers and folks like that. How does that account for that particular? I mean, is that a fair accountability of that?
Yeah, there's all kinds of questions, Manny, about the standards, and that's one of the things that, as somebody who has spent a career, whether it's working in government policy, public policy, economic development, business, I have found that you can make stats look pretty interesting. And one of the things I would say is that the TEA ratings, there's a lot of curious trends that we see there. You could pretty much draw a straight line, and if you go to social media, you can find it, that a lot of the accountability scores and the metrics, the A through Fs, there's a very direct correlation on economic ability of those communities and of those districts. And so it should not be a surprise to us to see that school districts that are more affluent typically tend to do much better on these tests. Now, there's any number of reasons why that's the case, and that's not to criticize those school districts. That's great. I mean, that's a blessing for them. But I also don't think it's a fair metric. I also don't think it's a fair measure of the academic quality that is being taught in the classroom. Let's be honest. When you come from a background that's challenged economically or otherwise, or a dysfunctional home environment, or perhaps you're coming from a part of the state that's getting a lot of new people coming in, there's different struggles. There's different challenges that are impacting a lot of those outcomes. English is a challenge in many of those school districts. So for us, I see a lot of schools that are challenging those ratings. They've been actually held up for a couple of years over the last 5 years because they've been challenged in the court of law. For me, I think it's twofold. Yes, we need to have an accountability metric that, generally speaking, everybody kind of agrees to what that looks like. I think there is some room for having some type of national norm discussion on accountability ratings. But I also think we need to have something. And that's one of the things where I think sometimes in the education field people go too far, saying, oh, well, we can't just teach through the test. There should be, we shouldn't, have some of these metrics. Well, no, we need to have accountability. I can't think of any outcome where you have an employee who says, well, I don't really want to be held accountable. And that's essentially what they're saying. If we're going to go to the taxpayers and ask for money, if we're taxpayers paying money, there does need to be some accountability. That said, we need to make sure that it's a fair, or at least a scale by which people can look at it and not point to obvious flaws in the system like we can with the TEA.
Yeah. And I guess in a perfect world, what does a rating system look like from a school board member, a parent, someone that is close to this situation here?
That's a great question, and I want to be careful not to assume that I've been, on a school board for 1 year, so I've got it all figured out. Every day there's something new that I learn, but I can tell you that our community deserves to know where academic quality stands in Abilene. Our students need to understand that they are going to be tested toward an outcome, and that's really to their benefit. And then ultimately, we need to be able to communicate where we're going. And that's what we've tried to do with AISD. We don't get to set the rules. If we did, they'd look very different, but we have to operate within them. And so we definitely have our conversations through our advocates within the community. I know I spend time talking again with state representatives and state officials about what we believe is good for AISD and a more equitable, more balanced system. With respect to the ratings, I think makes the most sense. And I think it's very important that we try to give kids every opportunity to succeed and then let the outcomes fall where they may.
Yeah. Well, Blair, I appreciate your time today. Congratulations on surpassing year one.
You made it?
Yes, indeed.
A few more to go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, for Blair Schroeder, AISD Board Trustee Place 3, I'm Manny Diaz. This has been another Sunday Conversation right here on Big Country Politics. We'll see you next time. God bless.